Hi guys, welcome to session number 14 of Marketing 101 series. My name is Ankit, and in this series we are going through the topic of marketing. Now, in our previous session, we have started with the consumer behavior topic, wherein we studied what is consumer behavior and how does consumer behavior is important for a marketing purpose. So, in today's session, we are going to cover the factors which affect the consumer buying behavior. Now, typically, when we were studying consumer behavior, we saw that to satisfy certain needs of himself or herself, a consumer go into the market to buy a product. Now, while he is in the market, he is investing his resources. So those resources are the efforts which he's putting in, the money which he's putting in, that is the financial resources, and the effort which he is putting in. So when we talk about consumer behavior, we study a lot of question from that perspective. So the perspective of a marketer when he is studying the consumer behavior is what is the customer buying? That is, what do they buy? Then when do they buy the product? Then where do they buy it? How often do they buy it? And what are the uses of a product for a consumer what is the purpose of the consumer when he's buying the product. So in today's topic we are going to move a little step further and we are going to analyze that what are the factors which affect a consumer buying behavior. Now factors are basically the events or the things which influence the decision making process of an individual when he's into the market and buying a product. And more importantly, these factors they are interdependent and they are interrelated. Means these factors which we are going to study, they're not standalone. They affect each other and they operate within each other. So there are three main categories which we will cover in this topic. So the first and foremost topic which we are going to cover is the cultural factor. Now, what is a culture? Culture is basically a combination of your values and belief and your religious and your custom. And we know this very well that this culture is transferred from one generation to the another. So all your religious practices, the customs, the language which we speak, our traditional art or our work pattern of the people which are doing that particular art, all this belongs to the culture of an individual. Now, to understand culture, we have to think of it as a perspective. So, our culture defines our perspective towards also our buying behavior. So, the thinking pattern of any consumer, this thinking pattern of culture is passed on from generation to generation. So, my parents' culture is transferred to me, and then I will transfer that culture to my next generation. And this culture practices, all these cultural factors, they are very important basis for market segmentation because we want when we are segmenting a market what we are doing we are distinguishing a segment of a group of customers which have a common belief which have a common practice. So one of those criteria could be their culture practice. And when we are developing our product or when we are targeting those customers with an advertisement, then the culture which they follow or the culture which they belong plays a very important role. It also signals the producer about what should be produced and supplied in the market because this culture influence a lot when a consumer is in the market and purchasing or making a purchasing decision. And within this culture factor, there are a lot of subculture factors. So, for example, if an individual is speaking a particular type of language, if an individual is following a particular type of religious practice, or there is a traditional art within his culture practice, so all these subcultural factors within the culture factor, they also influence his consumption behavior. The next factor after the cultural behavior or the cultural factor is the social factors. Now, the first and foremost social factor is the family. Now, family is what? Family is the people you live with, your mom, your dad, your siblings, sometimes your cousins, your uncle, your aunts. All these are family. Now, how does family influence a consumer's buying decision? Basically, every family has economic condition. Every family has a role to play in a society, or and every family has a status in a society. So very simply put, if a family belongs to a high income group, that is that family is earning a lot. So obviously they will have a very high purchasing power. And if they have a very high purchasing power, they will be very status conscious. And when a family is status conscious and they have resources to spend, so obviously they will spend on the branded products. And so where would they buy their product? They won't buy it from their local market. They will prefer to buy it from their mall or from that expensive market, those individual stores of the particular brand. But if the family belongs to a lower or middle income group, then they will prefer their local items. They would not be very brand conscious. The second sub-social factor is the reference group. Now, what is reference group? Basically, it is the group of individuals with which you have some common goal, which share your same values or which behaves the same way you behave within your community. So this is your reference group, basically your family or your friends or your social peers. Now, the good thing about reference group is these are the people with which you identify with. And because you identify yourself with this group, so you're also influenced by this group. So when you are buying a product, you ask for recommendation from your friends. Why? Because you trust them. You know that, okay, this person also likes the same thing which I like. So let's try the brand which he's trying. So you will ask suggestion before or recommendation before buying a product. Also, this reference group influence your buying decisions. So if all your friends are buying, let's say Apple iPhone, so you will also go and buy Apple iPhone rather than buying an Android phone. So within this reference group comes a opinion leader. Now, who is the opinion leader? Basically, these are the members of the group which influence the decision making, or not the decision making as such, but they influence you to buy a particular product by talking about it. So a good marketer will always target this opinion leaders because he see this opinion leader as the leader of this reference group. The third factor within the social factor is the roles and status. So what a marketer think of an individual, he thinks that that individual has many roles and duties to play in his life. So an individual will have a different role within his workspace. He will have a different role within his family. So what helps marketer to prepare and market product accordingly is how he looks at the individual and how he perceives his role and his duties. The good thing a marketer can do here is to behave as if those individuals have multiple roles. Identify the role or identify the duties which you want to target, and then you prepare and market your product accordingly. Do not take individual as a monolith. No individual is a monolith. Every individual show a lot of roles and lot of duties. The fourth factor in the social factor is your age and life cycle stage. Now, obviously, the individual age also defines his buying pattern or his purchasing pattern. So, if your consumer population is comprised of younger generation, in that case, you will see a lot of demand for the trendy clothes or technology related products like laptops and cell phones. And you will also see demand for recreational facilities like gyms and spas. But on the other hand, if your population comprises of elderly people, so in that case, you will see a lot of demand for medicine or healthy foods or healthcare facilities or those health related things like walking stick or a crutch. So age and life cycle of your consumer group also behaves or also is a very important factor within their buying decision. The fifth factor is the education and occupation. Now, obviously, if an individual is a CEO of a company, then he will definitely buy more expensive business suit. He will buy more expensive laptop. He will buy more expensive smartphone as compared to a clerk who is only doing a very limited amount of job. He will end up buying only simple clothes. He will only demand cheaper clothes. So the education and the occupation in which an individual is involved in that also defines his buying pattern. That also influences behavior towards the consumption. Next factor is your economic condition. Now, economic condition, again, if you belong to a high income group, if you are an individual who is earning lakhs of rupees in a month, then obviously you will have high purchasing power. And if you have high purchasing power, you will spend more. You will spend on the luxurious stuff. On the other hand, if you belong to a lower income family or middle income family, in that case, because you do not have a lot of money to spend, so you will not spend on branded stuff. You won't buy those unique products. You will settle yourself with those standard products. And finally, within the social factor, you have the lifestyle. Now, what is lifestyle? Basically, how a marketer can observe the lifestyle is by looking at the activities of the consumers. What kind of activities they are involved in? What is the interest of the consumer? What opinion do they have? What is the demography of the office consumer group? Now, when an individual observe the lifestyle, then this influence the preference of food of an individual, their fashion choices, their recreational choices, their media choices. Where do they find their information for the product? So, the lifestyle of the individual is also one of the most important factor in their buying pattern. The third and the final factor which affects our consumer buying behavior is psychological factors. Now, what do you mean by psychological factors? Basically, it is the study of how a consumer thinks. What is the reason a consumer gives when he is buying a product? What is the reaction of the consumer when he is presented with different alternatives, or when a product is slightly changed, or when a new feature is added, a new feature is removed? How does a consumer behave to those changes is the psychological factors. Now, basically, we study consumers' decision making process. Now, how does a consumer makes the decision? First and foremost, if he is motivated enough. Now, what is motivation? Interestingly, motivation is nothing but a need. But that need is raised to that level of intensity where he is pressed, the consumer is pressed to act on those needs. Those need have crossed the barriers of that intensity where consumer has that itch that he has to buy the product. Now, this motivation develops the purchasing attitude of a consumer. And because this motivation works on a subconscious level, it is very difficult to measure. So, for a marketer to tap on the motivation of the individual, he will have to continuously be in contact with the consumer. And how does the marketer do it? He do it through a lot of advertisement in every available channel, so that the consumer is motivated enough to buy the product. Second psychological factor is the perception. Perception is the thinking towards a product. Now, if a consumer thinks great about your product, then even a little bit change in the product will not change his thinking much. But if an individual does not think great about your product, if the perception of a consumer about your product is not good, then what will happen? A small change in the product will further disengage the consumer from your product. So individual with same needs might not purchase similar products because they have a different perception about the product. Third factor is the learning. Now we know very well the learning comes from the experience. Experience is when a consumer has already used your product, that he is your past consumer. How in the past that consumer has satisfied his needs and wants influence the learning of the consumer. Now this experience which has come through his past usage of your product influence his decision making pattern. Very simply put, if the consumer is satisfied with your product when he is used in the past, then he will have a strong inclination towards your buying your product again or associating with your company again. So for example, if you are driving Tata car, if you are influenced by your first purchase of Tata car, then obviously when you will go in the market to purchase the second car, more often than not, the first brand you will try is the Tata car. Why? Because through your learning, through your experience, you have learned that Tata cars are good cars. The fourth factor is the belief and attitude. Now, they are somewhat related to the perception of the consumer only, but the beliefs and attitude, these are the, you can say, these are not the perception because perception somehow is related to the reality. But beliefs and attitude, they are in the mind of the consumer. So, you must have heard about the brand image. Brand image is nothing but how a consumer believes about your product. He may or may not have used your product in the past, but beliefs and attitude are the image of the brand or image of the organization or image of the product in the mind of the consumer. Now, consumer purchase any products and services based on their opinion also. Even if the consumer has not used your company before in the past, if the consumer feels good about your company, if the consumer has a good opinion about your company, then there are chances that he will sometime in the future will associate with your company. If even if you are making a good product, even if you're making the best product in the category, if consumer feels, he does not know this for sure, but he feels that your products are useless for him, then he would never buy your product. Even if your product is good, even if you are the leading product maker in that category, but if the consumer feels that your product is useless to him, then you will not buy it. I think a very good example is the Windows laptop user and the MacBook users. Now, people who are using Windows laptop, they know that yes, I can use Windows laptop in my life, but a MacBook user or a MacBook marketer would have to create an image in the mind of the consumer that yes, if you want to switch, you can switch very easily. The same thing can be said about the personality. Now, what is the personality? Personality are the inner psychological characteristics or attributes of an individual. And these inner psychological attributes, they impact the outer behavior of the individual. Because consumption is not a psychological behavior, it's an outer behavior. But that outer behavior is influenced by your inner behavior. So a lot of personality traits, like whether you have whether the consumer have a dominating personality, or the consumer has self-confidence, or the consumer is sociable, or the consumer is adaptable. All these personalities affect the decision-making process to a great extent. Again, I'll take the example of a Windows laptop and a MacBook user. Now, a person who has used Windows laptop throughout his life, if that consumer do not feels that he is adaptable, then he will never switch to MacBook. So the marketer of the MacBook user, what can he do? He can try to tell the consumer that yes, we feel that you might feel that this change will you won't be able to adapt to the change from Windows to the laptop, but my MacBook software is so good that that transition will be very simple. So the marketer has to tell the individual that within his personality also the switch is possible. So these were the psychological factors, and overall, these were the factors which influence the consumer buying behavior. With this, we end up today's topic, and in the next session will be the last video of our marketing series. I hope you like this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. And if you guys are interested in learning macroeconomics, then I have a separate playlist for that. You can check it out. Thank you so much for watching.